Hey everybody. Hey everybody. It's Saturday, June 7th, and it's Tinderbox weekend meetup. Not weekend. It is the weekend, but it's just a meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox, and Tinderbox 10.2 should be out early next week. So clear out some space on your disks. And next week, I believe we have a meetup on uh, MCP, the bridge between Tinderbox and Claude AI, which should be particularly interesting. And without further delay, here is Michael Becker.
Hey everybody, typical format for the meetups is we go around the room and new people introduce themselves. We don't have anybody new today. We jump into a theme, which we don't have today, and then we will review people's comments, questions, projects, and what they're working on. So let's just jump right into that. Who's got what, and what are you working on, and what questions do you have about personal knowledge management and the tools you're playing with lately? Anybody? Dave, you had a question this week.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't mean to be yelling. I have Captain's log stopped working automatically. I have my AirPods in and I can't hear myself. Um, so I could share my screen and show this um inspector pane that shows what's going on in the background, which I'm having some difficulty interpreting. So and I just tried. Let me see if this works. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Not at all.
Okay. So there's desktop one. Um, is are you seeing anything? Here, where's
No.
the button? Oh, okay. There was another button I had to push. Okay, so let's see.
Yeah.
And then I could there's that. There's that. Now I just need to change the window. There's that. Okay. So this is the this has stopped working. Command one. And here is this little thing spins around and around, which I read about. I don't know why it's saying tagging current wind speed because, to the best of my knowledge, there is nothing in this document that deals with wind speed. If we go to the prototype, which is the same document without a lot of data in it, um, that one worked. It fired this morning. Again, saying current wind speed, pending tasks 25. Um, so what do I interpret from what I'm seeing in this pane?
Well, for me, it looks like your agents are frozen because you're
Okay,
and your rule is kind of stuck.
okay,
Well, except there's only 6 agents and one rule.
okay. Well, let's see. Let's go back to the one with all the data in it, see if that changes. 6 agents, 22 rules, pending tasks 25. Now, this number was different earlier. Well, there, look at that, 1,357. And this is what I have seen in the past. Recently changed, shows up, and that's the only one that ever shows up. And tagging still says current wind speed. So it may have something to do with the function. We've been wrapped up with moving and everything. So the only thing I've been able to do is look briefly at this and try and interpret what I'm seeing here. So I don't have much else to offer.
I'm not sure that this is going to be diagnostic, but just out of curiosity, where in the document is your note named current wind speed?
It's in a different document, as far as I know. It's the one of the notes in Nice Marmot that gets the, I think, weather data.
Okay, let's go to the, well, let's just go to the find bar, Command F, and ask, uncheck text,
Where's text?
To the left of names.
Okay.
Unselect that
Okay.
and search for current wind speed.
Okay. And what is that?
It's
2?
changed. It's changed to
Uh,
current
Yep,
temperature. It
humidity.
just
Yep, that's Marmot. Okay, did I type that right? This is tiny text. Yeah. Current wind speed. Oh, done. Well, no, you hit
No, just
return,
hit
right?
return.
And then, yeah, it just highlights and no results.
And is Marmot open?
Yes, it's in the background, or it's behind it. And there's the
Right.
Marmot. And now the document inspector does update to reflect. And Marmot's just cranking along. So I'm not, again, I really have no experience with this
No,
function.
my guess is Marmot has some tagging to do. And does the other have any syntax tagging?
Unless it's no, not deliberate. Well, I create tags and add them, but
Okay.
Presumably you could also close some Marmot temporarily because in a sense, if that's causing the blockage, it may be giving you a false reading on the captain's log.
Okay, so I've closed Marmot.
And it may be that the still reading current wind speed for the tagging simply because it's now not updated in the current session. Because I think we've established that current wind speed is not in this document, but it's also likely the case that I very much doubt the application's now trying to tag something that isn't around, so that may just be a slight false positive. And I suspect that were you to reopen the app, the tagging would probably now be empty.
Okay.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, have you tried quitting Tinderbox and restarting it?
Yes, and
Okay.
I've updated to the last. Well, I haven't updated the most recent beta, but that was the first thing I did was quit and
Okay.
restart. Yeah, I can actually close this and we'll see what happens. It hasn't changed it before. Save changes, and then I'll just quit the whole thing. Save. Okay, and then launch it. And open recent. That may have been confusing. I probably should have opened the regular one. Okay, and then command 1. And this guy and that guy. Move him up here. So that's tagging mid-watch. Okay. But again, 1,357 pending tasks, 56. Okay, one went down.
So Dave, can you see your agent just hung up on recently changed again?
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect something's happening with that agent.
Well, it's probably worth asking if people are clear what's happening. So you got on this menu, on this dialog, you've got 2 bars, which is sort of a progress bar. So in a bigger, more busy thing, what you're sort of expected to see is that little green bar moving from left to right, and then it cycles around and starts again. So basically it's telling you of the agents that you've got running, where you are in the overall cycle. And if it's not moving, it's one of 2 things. It's either gummed up or it's just running so fast there's really nothing to show. I'm not entirely sure there are a number of things going to pending tasks, but if you have an ever increasing number of them, it's probably an indication that essentially something's gummed up behind the curtain. So it's sort of useful to know. The other one to watch is that quadrant thing. So that's another indication that things are cycling through what should be going on. If that's stuck and hasn't moved, that's another indication, not necessarily of what is stuck, but that something is stuck. Because often with this, invariably the gummage isn't quite where you think it is. And so it takes a little spelunking to get down to the point. But I haven't seen anything yet that obviously points to what it is.
What's most intriguing for those who didn't read the forum post is that this thing has been rock solid for over a year, and it just stopped on the 1st of June. I think it made the 1 June entry and then stopped after that. This is recently changed, and there have been no recent additions in terms of notes. It only looks for notes in the last 2 hours. That's
I may be wrong, but I mean, I know you've just sort of, in a sense, moved locales because you've moved up north from down south.
not yet. We're still
Well,
down south.
okay, sorry. No,
Temporarily.
I'm just wondering if one of the possibilities, because I don't know if you have it open when you're on the road. So in other words, if it's pulling something like, if it's pulling something and it's expecting to one place and whatever you're pulling from is sort of not getting the right thing. That said, it shouldn't really matter because even if you say are in upstate New York and you ask for the
weather in New York,
weather
in
in
Florida,
Arizona, it still ought to give it to you.
Yeah, it has worked. Art's got his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that maybe you could go back to a prior version of release, to one that you know to have been stable, and even if you have a backup of your file and see what it's doing there. Like, see if you can find chronologically the date at which things changed. And the other thing I do is the good old system of hacking the file apart and taking out massive chunks until it doesn't happen that I identify what actually was wrong.
No, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, since we're this far into it, can we see the function or rule or whatever, the action that ought to be making
Yeah, sure.
the note?
You want to look at the prototype or the month itself? Month, June. I think it's a rule. Over rule. No. Makes it P day edict. Yeah, here it is. So it checks to see if the current month is today's month, and then my date equals today creates my date. It won't create my date if my date exists. So I don't have a check to see if it already exists. And this is the code we added a few meetups ago to color the weekends. And then it disables it for today.
Okay, so the month
I mean, if it's
supposedly, we know that my date should the my date of June 2025 should be today. Is it?
how can I quickly determine that command, or let's see, look in a displayed attributes. So let's see, add, whoops, not that, my date. Okay. It is.
That's good. My string should be the formatted date.
My string. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong thing. There it is.
That looks
correct.
Right. It should have created a note
For Saturday.
for Saturday, June 7th.
Yep.
If my date dot weekday is greater than 5, color of the new note. So could we add a say store the value of new note and say substring after we've made new note? Let's store it.
So down here. Mark froze.
I know you on the line that says create. What Mark's wanted to do is, what we want to do is just store new note, which essentially when you call create, it does its work, and what it gives you back is the path of that note. So I think what Mark wants to do is to store the variable new note to just check that actually, you know, because we're getting nothing back. So on the line that ends create my string, just go to and then put $$, subtitle. We'll misuse subtitle just for a moment so we can easily get a you know, because we're not using dollar subtitle equals new note.
Dollar subtitle equals
New note. So the variable in the line above.
Yeah, how did I write that? Was it
lowercase n?
Okay.
And then a big N in the middle.
Okay.
Semicolon. And then just show, and then add to your displayed attributes for that note, just add subtitle. So we can tidy this up later, but this is just a quick hack to essentially show you, to give you feedback. Right, so that would imply that create isn't happening, because if create was happening, new note would be a path string for the new note.
He hasn't done a run now.
And that doesn't work either.
Oh no, there you go. No subtitle is
Yep,
go.
there it is.
Oh, but doesn't appear in June's container.
Okay, well, do you want to now do a find and see where it is? So what you could do is and go to whatever the name is of the new note, which would be what, Saturday.
Saturday.
Not quite
Comma June 7. It's also a comma 2025. Cannot read.
Just search for that much. You don't.
Okay, good.
There is a note.
But not where we think it is.
Okay. So 0, 1 results in this view. One other result. How do I find it?
Somewhere else in the document was what it's telling you.
Top level note.
All right. So captain's log. That we go down to 2020.
Why don't you?
What you can do now, you're at root level. If you use the find again, click on the match, and it should select the. It should select the. Now click in the find pop up in the results. Just click on Saturdays on there you go. Click on that one, and it'll show you where that is.
Okay.
There you go. So it's got added to the bottom of
2024.
Where it's gone to last year is where it's gone.
That is very strange. They're all 2024. So let me slide this guy over so it's a little cleaner. There we go.
So if you go back to your rule and just check whether we're somehow missetting the year.
Okay. That was in June 2025, but it's in the prototype. I think month. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the mother. So we didn't add the subtitle in this code here. But why would the year be wrong? We checked the dates. So on the prototype I can add.
Well, if you can, you can do it on your note. You added those displayed attributes at the moment on your June 2025 note, so which is 4 down on the left hand side. It's 4 down from the top.
Okay.
And I think you'll find if we click that guy, there we go. So my string is that's. Oh, wait a minute. Is it? No, because the year is in. So one of the things I was thinking, so the year is in the string, and that's good because if, for instance, you had, for sake of argument, managed to make 2 notes called Saturday, June the 7th, for sake of argument, in different years, but they were just called Saturday, June the 7th. If the first one existed, create would not create another. But that doesn't seem to be the point. Obviously, it's a different year, but I just to make that point in passing.
That part actually kind of occurred to me when I thought maybe I was having a collision with something from a year ago. But again, I started this in March of 2024, work January 3rd, March 2025, April, May.
What's interesting, actually, is that the subtitle would imply there's something a bit hinky here, because I would expect to see, if it's the path, I would expect to see something like slash from it's a path from root. So in fact, you're getting the name of the note, but you're not getting the path of the note, which is actually what we expect create to pass back. So that might the string we're giving, my string is my string looks all right. There's no reason why not. The comma shouldn't cause a problem in the name.
And
This
again,
has
this is
been
all
working
work
before.
for over a year. So
Yeah. Though it is interesting, you said for about it. Well, you said for over a year, but we do know it's now put a new. It has made a note, just put in the wrong place, which is also rather. But
well, but it
odd.
hasn't made all of them. It hasn't made all of them. So that's also interesting. So
You now have two problems. Yes.
yes, correct. I don't wish to. If we have nothing better to do, I'm happy to continue doing this. I just don't want to monopolize the meeting if somebody has something else.
Well, a quick one in passing too for your prototype is that it's working fine as it is, but on your my date equals today, normally we stick in a date wrapper. That's just to be us to signal unintentionally to Tinderbox that no, what I want is today, as a date. That's what the date bit does, and you've done it elsewhere in the action, but that's not an issue here.
So what would I do for best practice? What would my date equal?
Well, if you just select select P month in the view,
prototype.
yeah, P month.
Okay.
And on the line it says my date equals, put
Mhm.
date lowercase, open parenthesis, and then close parenthesis after the closing quotes. There you go. Yeah,
that's better. Okay.
as I say, you're doing it elsewhere, and this is not the problem. But I just spotted that passing, so it's another little tune up you can do.
Take advantage of an opportunity. Yeah. So, and what might this have to do with the unusual behavior or what's happening here?
I think nothing.
Okay.
And I don't think the behavior is unusual. You've got 6 agents, and I don't think any of them are very complex or long, are they?
They're very simple. Yeah.
Right. So what it's doing is Tinderbox has a timer that so it doesn't run agents continuously. I think it's currently something like 7 seconds. And it says, okay, start running agents. And before it knows it, it's finished running agents. And it just leaves the bar at the last agent it's run, which is the last agent in the document in this case, which is recent changes. And that'll continue until the next time it's time to run some agents, at which point it looks at its watch, says, let's run the first few agents. Whoops, we finished all the agents. Look at that. And the agent updater goes to sleep again for 6.5 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. So that was a head scratcher.
Well, should we try? I see Mark's suggestion in the chat. There is to use there's an alternate syntax where you say, I want the note named this, but I want you to put it in this a section in this container. So make it inside this path.
In June or in the prototype?
No, so go back to the prototype, because if it fixes it for one, it'll fix it for all. So we might as well use the prototype. So what he's suggesting is that where you've got about halfway down the thing, you've got var string new note equals create my string. What we would, the 2 bits we're going to provide are the name of the note, which you've got in my string already. But before that, as a first argument, we will provide the path to the container, i.e. the name of the container in which that note is going to be created.
The literal name as
well,
it has to be a variable. It has to be.
As we're in the prototype, we we'll make even more of a mess. But essentially, there are two ways that you can. There are 2 ways that you can call the create command. The reason there's a sort of container and a name thing is to allow you to do a loop where you keep changing the name, but you don't change the container if you're making 20 notes or something. So normally what you've got is sufficient. The other thing you can do is you can do it all in one go, in a sense of, because you're saying go and make the note at this path. And if you don't give it a full path, Tinderbox says, oh, right, well, you must want it here. So you could either provide the container and the name, or you can provide the name, but you can provide the name, in fact, as a path, which is another way to solve this. So at the moment, you're giving it just the name of the note. I'm just trying to think what we could do. We know the name of our container. This is the month note, isn't it? So
Correct. So if the month of the created,
Yep.
so this is referring to the created month. The month container is
Yep.
June. Is
So what we
equal
could
to the same
do
month
is
as today.
we could Mark may correct me here, but I think what we could do is for the my string, we could say my string equals $path. Do we need a joining slash plus my date? And then we just pass that to create. So we're passing one argument, but we're passing a full string. So we're saying to Tinderbox, make me a note, unless it exists, at this exact location, because you're giving it the entire path from the thing. Yeah.
Need a slash.
You do need a slash.
Okay.
You
Oh,
need
no,
to put that in
you
quotes.
need you'll need
in the
quotes around the
quotes.
slash, and you need a
Yeah.
plus sign after the quotes.
Okay.
So what you're saying is make a string that is the string value of $path, put a slash on the end, and then add on to the end of it the date formatted in the style you want.
Does
and
that
what
look
you'll
right?
end up with, if we put that in what we can do is we can put that in subtitle. We will clear this up in a moment, but on that line, just put $subtitle equals my string.
Oops, semicolon.
You'll need a capital S on the string there.
You can tell I don't do this very often. Oh, I didn't need to do the autocomplete. All right.
And you got two N's and no G now.
I need magnifying glass.
That's okay. Yeah, you're good. You're good. And we might have to clean out some subtitles after this, I realize, because this is going to run on everything, but that's not a problem to do. So what you should now see is if you switch back to June,
right.
your month one there. Move so we can see the subtitle.
Didn't really
reset
change. That. Delete.
This is the old version,
just reset
folks.
the subtitle.
Just
if you right click, if you right click on the left end, right click it. There you go. Use inherited value, and that'll reset it. I mean, there are a number of ways to do it. That's
I think
nice
we wrote it. I think we wrote it in the code for this actual container.
Right. You edited. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to make this re-inherit. Well, we can do it here.
What do you want me to do?
We might as well clear it back so there's less kitty litter to claim up. So if you go to the at the top of the inspector, the number 4 icon, quick stamp. In the search box, type rule, capital R,
Edict.
ULE, hit enter.
Edict.
Was it edict? Sorry. Okay. Press enter. Right. Okay. And press inherit. On the left hand side, the little button. Press that.
This guy.
Yeah. So what we're making sure is that you're using the version that we just set in the prototype, because we made a local change. Right. Now you can at the top of the inspector on the right hand side on the Death Star icon, click that, and that takes us back to there. And you'll notice that my string is now different. If we run, click run now on that. Okay. There we go. And we've got our note.
But there's no path. Oh, subtitle. Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
My string. Okay.
And you've also got your note.
And it's in red.
Does that look right?
Yeah, that looks all correct.
Okay, right. Just, you might want to put on your pencil jotter or something. What you want to do now is you want to go back to the prototype and delete the line that says substring equals my string. And then just probably make yourself in slow time later, make an agent that just basically finds any note that has a substring and set it to nothing. because we set this for the whole document, it will have set the substring for all sorts of other notes.
You mean subtitle?
Subtitle. I do apologize. Thank you,
But
Chuck.
I don't display subtitles, so it shouldn't
Fine.
hurt.
Well,
It just
you can
adds
do that in slow
control.
time, but that's the kitty litter we created in doing that. So I think the mystery is not solved, but the problem is solved.
So if we just go ahead and delete this
Yep.
this note, and then click up here, there it goes, and there it goes, and it fired mid-watch, and mid-watch should give me an error because there's a net. Oh, nope, it worked. All right, so everything worked. The question is, will it work tomorrow morning? I think it will, because before deleting, I could not automatically create the note, no matter what I tried. So I'm puzzled by the fact. So we simply made explicit the path, but I
Yes,
wonder
yeah.
why it worked for so long and now requires that. But neither here nor there.
Yeah. Oh, also at the moment you've got a Saturday, June the 7th note inside your 2024 month folder, June folder, which you can now remove because when we were testing it, we found. I just wonder if you got somehow a totally unexpected name collision.
And it's interesting how this June 3rd, 2025 appeared June 20th. And where did my June? Where was I last year? Did it stop making notes in June? July. Let's see if July. Oh, wow. Got a bunch of missing notes in July. August looks interesting. It may have been me not turning the machine on or something. This seems odd. That seems odd. All right, that looks fairly complete. It may have been early. That was when I was experimenting with it early on in April, May, June. Building this thing.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. You've got some more 2024. You've got 4 Tuesday the 3rd through.
Yeah. It was apparently working automatically and depositing them into 2025. So
I can't see an obvious reason why it should, but to a certain extent, I think this thing is quit while you're ahead.
I agree.
And watch for any further misbehavior, because I don't think we're going to get any more obvious tellback from the system as to what's happened.
Well, it might be interesting to see what's going on here, if anything different. Again, that's the last agent it ran, and none of the agents are really updating. So, but pending tasks, is that number significant in any way?
That's actually a Michael Becker telltale. If you have a huge number of agents and rules and they're all running and some of them take a long time, it is possible that Tinderbox doesn't finish all of the stuff it wants to do before it starts running rules again. And so its queue of things that gets bigger and bigger and bigger ad infinitum. And I think Michael is the only person who has ever hit that wall. Mark Anderson may have done it at times too. I've never been able to do it, but if this number gets really, really, really big, that's what's going on.
Yeah, so, I think the sort of thing that causes that is if you ask every note in the document to see if it's in some way used by any other note in one of probably a whole lot of attributes. So basically you ask everything to check everything all the time, and fun enough the app gets a bit of a headache.
So on the 619 edicts, it disables the edict in the note that ran it after it runs, so that it doesn't run every time. But
it's still good to know roughly how many edicts there are around.
Well, and Tinderbox has to look to see if it's disabled, right? That at least must do that check. So that's what that number will continue to grow, though the performance penalty is less. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you tomorrow how it works out in the forum. I stop sharing. Over to you guys.
Okay, that was good. Anybody else have any other projects they're working on? Let me close my window.
I'm going to put Michael Becker on the spot here since he often puts other people on the spot. Could you just summarize in a sentence or two the takeaway from the lesson we learned today?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Could you just summarize in a sentence or two for posterity what the moral of this story is?
Well, I think the for me the big time moral of the story is the tool will tend to do what you tell it to do, and you will often not, and you often don't necessarily understand what in fact you're telling it to do. So this was not a problem, and we have a knee-jerk reaction of wasn't me, got to be the tool. So the tool's doing exactly what you're telling it to do. And the more explicit you can be to it, and the more kind you can be to it, and saying, please do this exactly, that goes well. And then, like any other interaction between human and human, human and non-human agent, like Tinderbox, all hilarity ensues when miscommunication happens. So so rather than pointing fingers and blaming, you say somebody's wrong. Why don't you look for the miscommunication? And what you'll want to start doing is the telltale signs of, well, what do you expect to be happening? In this context, I expect a note to be created. Well, search for that note and see if it got created. And then just slowly start debugging that down. Other things that I've learned in situations like this too is because my files aren't, incredibly complex. When in doubt, if you've had code and you think it's been working or it's been working, pull that code out, open up a blank file, and test it in that blank file without anything else going on. Because then you can see, all right, this code, the code's working, so there's something in the context of my file that is not, or the code's not working, and then you tell Eastgate, and you can be very explicit. I'm doing this, and it's not working as expected. And you don't, one thing I've learned too is you want to hesitate from calling it a bug, because it's not working as I expect, because there very well may be reasons why it's not working as you expect. And the very rare occasion we do find that it actually is a bug, and then Mark fixes it. So those are some of the things that I learned from watching this exchange. I think the other thing that my takeaway from this is, in the immortal words of the Douglas Adams, don't panic. Especially if you have backups of your files. So this is another best practice for me in using Tinderbox, is have a backup strategy. And you can rely on Time Machine, but I don't find that's enough personally. So I've chosen to use Arc Backup. So I have a hour backup of every one of my files. So the worst case I'm ever going to lose is an hour's worth of work. And at least once a month, if not twice a month, I revert back to a backup because I've screwed something up, or I've deleted something, or something happened and wasn't the fault of the tool, it was the fault of me or whatever. And so that having that backup always has that peace of mind that no matter what, I can revert back to at least where I was an hour ago. So those are some of the things that I learned from this process. So for me, those are the big takeaways. So the summary is, clear communication between you and the tool, clear idea of what you want to do, break it down into its pieces, use a, pull it in, if you can, isolate the kind of function, the code you're trying to write, isolate it into a standalone file just to make sure if the code's working or not in the context that you expect, and then just slowly start debugging it around. Chuck, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to observe that there's still a mystery here. The original code had a create, and it was capturing the path of that create in, I guess it was a variable called new note. And when we examined that path, it wasn't a path. It was missing it was not a full path, which is what we would have expected from the create. And as someone who has done a lot of that. I can tell you that I have run into a variety of situations where something that was working stopped working. And it was often, with things like an expectation that I use this as an example, but this wasn't this anymore. And I couldn't find out how to resolve it. What Mr. Anderson suggested and provided as a fix is what I find I often have to do, which is say, wait a minute here. Something has gotten a little bit confused in the interpretation of this code. What can I do to put guardrails on it so that it absolutely can't do it wrong? And that's generally how I've had to solve those problems, is just back off and do something which is perhaps a little bit more coding work, but like putting the path expression in there and making the path with the argument was passed to create to be a full path, fix the problem. But that's the kind of thing that I found I've had to do many times. If I was using the obvious should work stuff and it doesn't, then go back and find a way to put guardrails on it and make it so it absolutely has to work the way I intend.
Yeah.
Suggestion.
Yeah, that's the whole point I was trying to say. The better way of saying, be as explicit as you can. The other reason why I think this might have cropped up for you, Dave. You're on Backstage, right, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah. So Mark, in the one or two Backstage releases ago, he had addressed a point that Doug and Chuck and I had raised about being able to add string or ID to the create function. And that change may have added a little bit more generality that required a bit more specificity, as we just solved in your problem right now. So, so there was a change in the code within the last couple of weeks that it specifically to the create function that seems to have had some byproduct of what's going on with what you're experiencing right now. And
yeah, I just want to sort of speak up in my defense at the beginning of your summation that at note, if anyone wishes to look at the forum post, I don't believe at any time that I blame the app or say it was a bug or I asked for some assistance in debugging. And again, it was code that was working solidly for over a year. And I was not in any way attacking the app, or I was genuinely puzzled and asking for assistance. I think the whole preface to your summation suggests that somehow I was blaming Tinderbox, and that was not the case. So.
No, nor was that my intention. And I think no one's at fault. Let's just figure out what the solution is until we find until we find what the fault is. So that's fine. Yeah, good. So that's anybody else have anything else to add to that?
Well, I just put the summary, and this will probably echo as it probably did for me when I was, as a young officer, I was always told when giving an order, make absolutely certain that it is understood to be the order you gave. So, well, we don't have, works differently with humans, but with the system, this is where, that little bit of light logging was actually how we got a handle on what was going on. We got something, and then the penny dropped that actually, no, that wasn't what we expected or wanted. And although we didn't necessarily know what was going wrong in the original instance, we found a solution that gets that. So that's where, and we used a very simple hacky version of doing logging, and you use one of Chuck's or Michael's library, there'll be or people build their own logging functions, because often the more complicated the code you're doing, which admittedly, as you say, is not complex here, it's a really good thing to be able to do, especially when you're building it the first time. Then you can turn it all off. But if things are going wrong, sometimes just basically giving yourself a tailback, however you find convenient, of the steps that are going through in the course of a single overall action can be useful, because that can be where you get a handle on why something's gone wrong. And I think it's been said, it's a pointless endeavor trying to work out who to point the finger at. That's not really the point. You want to fix it. So the first thing is to fix it, and then and then you can pause and reflect as to whether you think there's sort of something sort of worse going on, and whether you need to look a bit further around it.
Yeah, I think another good thing to remember too is the order of the commands matter as well.
Right.
So it's very important to think about what you're doing when you're doing it, and if you sometimes just change the order of some of your code, that can change a lot.
Well,
Yeah,
and the other thing to keep in mind is that when we have rules and edicts and we're turning some of these things on and off, and an edict might invoke something else that perhaps causes another edict to run, that's when I would argue you need to use a more sophisticated logging approach. Because when I've had to debug those kinds of situations, having a logging system can give you either timestamps or even better, an index, so you know exactly the order in which things occurred. And you can look back and say, oh, this edict or this rule ran when I didn't expect it to, or ran after this other thing that needed to be done. So that's why the code isn't working.
Mhm.
So for simple situations, yeah, what we demonstrated with a quick and dirty logging technique, that's great. I think we all do that all the time. But you can get into situations where if you're working with Tinderbox, which gives you some fairly powerful capabilities, you do need to think about how do you solve a problem when you've got code running at different places at different times, and think that through. And that's when maybe you need to start using a little bit more sophisticated approach.
Right. And by the way, before you get to logging, another kind of shorthand log function is the show operator. So you could
Yes.
throw show in and just have it pop up right after some action code of like, show me what you just did.
And by the way, show will change the order in which rules and edicts will run because it delays things. So that's another reason to think about how these different processes are running relative to each other, because show itself can actually change the behavior of some things because it adds that delay to do the show.
So there's another interesting lesson learned here too, is context matters. When you're doing something, where you're doing something really matters.
Yep.
Well, that goes back to your point about doing the test in a small test file. So for instance, for sake of argument, using create, if it works in a small test file, you know that there is an issue with create per se. But there is an issue with create or something else in the wider context.
Yeah.
And it can be a bit bloodstained if Murphy's law, the thing that's decided to sort of cause you grief is in the middle of something larger, and often just the only thing to do is to gently sort of tear things down until you close in on it. But it's a doable process.
And it tends to happen at midnight when you have a deadline 5 hours from now and you're stressing out. That's a whole other issue, but
that's Murphy's law.
Yeah.
So what I just noticed is that the edict did work as intended and as written in the test file, where I simply took a duplicate of Captain's log, deleted all the previous data. So there was only one root path, or one path from the root to 2025. So it couldn't get confused with 2024. So it's probably still related to that path issue. But in terms of using the small test file, which is what I intended to do with the prototype version with all the data removed, it didn't illuminate the problem because it worked. So that doesn't necessarily make anything easier. I think the issue is the change to the create function, that the fact that there wasn't a 2024 container is what allows the prototype, the test file, to work properly. There aren't two year containers to confuse it. So I think we know what the problem is, and to add the additional path name to the new node.
Now here's another thing to consider in this. So, and Chuck and I came across this a few weeks back. Paths do not necessarily designate a unique note. So a path leads to the note the first note in the hierarchy of a particular name along a particular path. Now, if you had a note that 2 notes at, say, root, or 2 notes in the same container with the same name, that will create a conflict because Tinderbox will default to the first one of that name that it sees. So if you truly are looking for uniqueness, using ID or ID string is a more optimal approach than path, because ID is absolutely guaranteed to be unique.
If I may, and this is an interjection really for later listeners, and here's the challenge. If you're listening to this, if you're starting out, just using name is generally good enough.
Yeah.
And it's easy and it's sort of intuitive. As the complexity of what you do increases, you will begin to hit, you may hit the issue that Michael has mentioned. It's actually remarkably easy. Tinderbox is very forgiving. If you want to have 2 notes called some note in the same container, that's fine. You can have that because it so happens they have a unique ID under the hood, which we can actually read via $ID, that allows us to say this subnote is different from that subnote. Because the path is the same for them both, because it's just using the aggregate names all the way down through the containers and the notes. It's not unique, and it's a good thing to note is in pretty much anything, if you're asking for something and getting the wrong thing back, or the wrong thing is going to the wrong place, the likelihood is you've basically got an ambiguity. So you've got 2 things that are the same, and one thing that is consistent across Tinderbox is that if in doubt, it will take the first match by outline order, dollar outline order, or just look at it in the outline and find which one is first. It's the same thing, because dollar outline order is in fact the order as you see it in the outline fully expanding. So that's another useful little wrinkle. But it's absolutely the case that, when you're starting out, you don't need to worry too much about things like IDs, because it's not your immediate concern. Don't be worried that other people are using them, because what you're seeing when that happens is people saying, right, I know what I need to do. I'm going to do this with lots of code, and I'm going to have it running in the background, and I don't want to be looking at this again, and I don't want any ambiguity. And at that point, you can stick ID, and you're sort of good to go. But don't worry if you see that in a code sample, think, oh, I must be using ID. Not necessarily the case. You're absolutely fine if you're doing very simple stuff, just using name or path.
All right, Dave, that was great. Led to a really valuable discussion. Okay, does anybody have anything else? Otherwise, I've got something fun that I can show you that I've been playing with this week. Shall we go?
Fun.
Shall we go for fun? All right. So, again, due to confidentiality, I can't be specific, but I have, as a result of Tinderbox, I can say that Tinderbox will be fueling my next 6 months worth of income, because I have won a ghostwriting project, and I would never have had it happen if it weren't for Tinderbox. And if it weren't for the publishing system work that I've been building over the last 4 or 5 months. So it's pretty exciting. And I want to demonstrate to you one of the things I developed this week as I'm going through the project, because what's going to be really great about this is I'll be working with about 15 different people in the process of getting this project done. So we'll be spending the summer working on figuring out collaboration strategies with Tinderbox with other people that aren't using Tinderbox, which is going to be very interesting. But one of the points that's come to mind is, as I do my work and I work in context, what I like to do is I like to keep everything. I like to stay within the note that I'm working on, if possible, and move around as little as possible when I'm doing my work, so that I can stay focused on what's currently happening. And one of the ideas that came up to me this week while doing that was so I'm just getting my conversation set up here. If I come up with, hey, I'm working on this particular note, and an idea, like a task that I want to assign myself, or someone else comes up to mind, I don't want to have to jump to another part of the Tinderbox file to create that task. I want to have it, in that context, created in real time. So what I'll do is I want to demonstrate for you in a brand new file, kind of this task management function that I developed, and I can walk us through. We've got a good amount of time, so I can walk us through the iteration of that thinking as we go through it. So let's say we let's go ahead and create like note 1. And let's say we're writing some notes or some ideas or thoughts. I'm nowhere near getting ready to actually write prose. So a lot of it right now is a lot of brainstorming and idea and thought collection and such. And so as I'm doing this, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I've got a task. I've got something that I want to assign myself or remind myself like a to-do later. And so the very next thing that came up into mind is I created an attribute called task. Okay, so I've got an attribute called task, and we're going to make that set. Okay, so now I've got an attribute called task, and let's say the attribute is @Becker set up a digital twin. And another thing I'll be talking about, since next week we're talking about AI, in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be prepared to talk to us about how we can use Tinderbox to be setting up and interacting with their digital twins, like and curating a personal AI that can represent us, so you can be having conversations with someone's doppelganger, digital doppelganger, if you will. So I essentially have that task, and why don't we do another one while I'm at it too? Create a text template to train the AI. All right. So let's say so within the context of this of taking this particular note, I came up with 2 ideas or tasks for myself, and I then want to later report them off. So what do I do with that? So the very next thing is I'm going to jump to outline. I'm going to go up to prototypes, add in a quick prototype. And let's call this one P task. And we'll call this one P notes. And I'll start adding some elements to that just so we can show the automation of it. I like this page one. That's the page. Inbox. All right. So we've got an inbox for our tasks. We've got an inbox for our things. Let's say we've got our resources folder. And under our resources folder, we've got a folder called tasks folder. So along the lines of what we've been talking about, we know this is where we want our task to go. And so that begets the question that we want another folder called P folder. All right, so we've got a folder, and this is going to be a folder, and that will be a folder. Okay, so now what do we want Tinderbox to do? At this point, we want Tinderbox to create these tasks for us and to stick them into the task folder. And then once we've done that, I'll demonstrate some iterative elements of that. And often when I'm doing this kind of work, before I start creating functions, and we'll eventually, as part of this exercise over the next 30 minutes, we'll eventually move this into a function, and this will be something that you can do repeatably and easily copy and paste across Tinderbox and files, etc. But for now, we're just going to start doing our work in a stamp. And so we're going to say create tasks. And we'll just we'll iterate this and I haven't intended this to be a lesson today, so I'm kind of making it the lesson flow on the fly, but we'll kind of iterate this through a step-by-step approach on how one might want to go about doing this. And by the way, if anybody has any questions while I'm doing this, raise your hand, interrupt me to say, what are you doing? Why are you doing it that way? So the first step I want to do is I want to be able to create tasks that are in that task attribute. So I'm going to come up with a variable, and we'll call it vtask, and vtask is going to equal to the items in the task attribute, and I'm actually going to have that be a set, so there aren't any duplicates. So vtasks is a set, and the very next thing we're going to say, and we're going to another variable called vnote. And the vnote task is going to be the kind of placeholder where we're going to store the path of the note that just gets created. So then later we can add some code that will enable the ability to manipulate it. And let's just call this a list actually for fun. And we'll call this one vtask list. And you can kind of get the idea that of how you're doing this, how you can like iterate against your various variables and such. So the first thing we want to do is vlist dot, vtask list dot each and vtask. And I'll explain this in just a minute. All right, so what's happening here? So essentially what we're doing is we're saying, hey, Tinderbox, I want you to iterate against each of the items that are in your list called task. And let's make sure task is actually a set or a list. It's fine. Okay, so let's go back to our stamp. So I want you to iterate against each of the items in this variable we're calling vtask list. We populated with the values from task. And then now that we're doing that iteration, what do I want you to do? So the first thing I want you to do is, let's just kind of say, we'll say create vtask. All right. So what's that going to do? All right. So what this is going to do is it's going to say for each items in the idea of the list vtask, create a note. And if you haven't set a path, if you haven't given it any other details, Tinderbox is going to default to creating those notes as children of the currently selected notes. So when we do that, you'll see that Tinderbox has created, and we've got vtask. Okay, so why did that happen? That happened because we don't have a defined variable. Oh, no, it's because I spelled it wrong. See, TSK. And so this is a great tell. So when you get a variable name back, you look at what that variable name is, and that either means two things. One, you haven't defined the variable, or you've spelled something wrong, which is often the case for me. Tinderbox, when you're doing a .each loop, it already defines the variable for you. So that's very clear to me that I've just spelled that wrong. So this variable that gets defined in the .each loop, I've now got spelled correctly. So when I go and do that, you'll see that Tinderbox has now automatically created the two notes for me, the two tasks within that note. So okay, so that showed us that I've got my tasks created, and that's useful. So now what do we want to do is we want to say, well, I actually don't want those notes to be created in that particular path. So we're going to create another variable called vpath. Path equals, and where do we want this path to be? It's going to be in resources folder. If I spell something wrong, please somebody call it out. Tasks folder. So I want tasks that we get created to go into the tasks folder, and I also want to say variable string. Well, let's just start with that right now, and then we'll go to the next page. So if we do that, and we say now we want our notes now to be created in the path of the tasks. So if we go up here, we now see our two tasks have been created in the right destination where we want them to be. So that works out really well. So we're moving along. But now what I want to be able to do is I now want to be able to iterate and play with these notes that we've just created. So I'm going to create another variable, and I'm going to call this one string vNote. In the demo what Dave Rogers just showed us, he called it vNewNote. So this is just a variable that we've created, and I'm going to say vNote equals create vpath vtask. Now, what's going to happen is the create function will return to this variable the path of the new note that it's just created. And if we want to actually see that, we can say vNote. And this is a great example of using the show function as a quick and dirty logging capability. So we go like this, and you'll say, here's the path of the note that we've just created for the two notes that we've just created, and we've seen they've done. So we now know that the whole idea of vNote is in fact working for us. So now that we know that vNote variable is holding the path of the note that we just, each of the notes that we've just created, we now can start iterating against those notes. So what's the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, every one of my notes has a type and my tasks have an owner. I also use this idea called source and source ID, which I'll explain in just a minute. And that's enough for now. So we'll go ahead and create those notes. URL. All right. So now we've got these two notes, and and now we could either do this as an on add or we can do it using the create function. I'm going to do everything with the create function just for the sake of this demo. So the very next thing we want to do is, well, with the new note that we've just created, we want to be able to say the prototype of vNote, aka the note that we've just created, is going to equal to p task. All right. And we also want the type of vNote to be equal to task. Now you could have this set by the prototype, but I choose not to because I want this type to be local for each individual note. So let's go ahead and just test what we've just done there. And again, this is what's called the designation function. So what we're doing is we're designating to Tinderbox which note which note we want to set the prototype value for. And so if we just say prototype equals p task, then that says the current note of focus is going to get the value of p task. But if we add v note, that's saying the note whose path is this set the prototype to p task. So now if we go ahead and apply that stamp, you'll see that our notes now have the appropriate prototype set, and you'll see that their type is task. And again, you'll notice that because this is bold, that tells me that this value for this note is local versus that value being inherited from a prototype. And I want that for my own reasons for various search functionality and such like that. Okay, so now what we've set our task and we've created our tasks. And again, the value for me doing this is as I'm doing my work, and if you think about it, I've got 2,000-3,000 notes in some of my files. I don't want to be scrolling up and down the outline to create a task and then have to come back to my work. By doing it this way, I can be automating the creation of that task functionality for me. And we'll go back and illustrate a few other elements as we go about doing that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to establish the source of this note, because I want to remember if this is happening in my writings or if it's happening from meeting notes that I had been taking during one of the calls. I want to remember the context to which this task idea had come up to me. So we're going to go ahead and create another note up here. And this note is going to be called, it will be a string. We'll call it the source equals. And we'll say the v source is going to equal name of this note plus, and then I kind of plus, and I have a somewhat convoluted thing where I say XID because I use this for anchors too when I do my output of my templates, plus created dot format. I'll explain this in just a minute when I'm done. Plus underscore plus ID. So what that's going to do is
Format's wrong.
Dot format needs to be spelled correctly.
Perfect.
And you probably wanted to spell v source VSRC and not
I
CR.
don't. I don't. I like to keep my variables as short as possible personally. But
Yeah, just
but your
but for the sake of
art's correct. You're got different spellings.
Oh, got it. I see what you're saying. V source. There you go.
And you need a dot after created.
Where?
You have got a greater than. You want
Oh, got it. Sorry, typos. Okay, got it. So source is going to equal the name plus a prefix, the date this note's created, with the format of the day, 26th, the month, like June, or and the year 25. And then an underscore, and then the ID of the note. And so what we want to do then is we can go down here and we can now say, this is going to be source v note equals v source. Okay, so now the value of our source note is going to get populated in the tasks that we just created. So I'm always going to be able to go back to it. Plus, I want my source ID. And sometimes I do this just because I can, and I can deal with it later. And the reason why I'm going to do this is if I ever want to regenerate for whatever, a linking or regenerate the relationship of this task note to the ID of the note, the ID of the note that created it, I'm going to grab the ID as well. But the reason why I do both the v source note and the source ID is if I happen to be copying and pasting these notes across different files, the ID number may not necessarily be the same in some other destination Tinderbox file. Whereas with this nomenclature, it actually can be. And another thing that we can do, while I think about that too, and I tend to not, in this particular project, I'm not doing this, but you could also add here vnote ID plus, I'm going to do it while I'm just, maybe Mr. Anderson, you can remind me. I think it's document name. Is it?
You want the document name from the document object.
Tinderbox file, right?
Yeah, bear with me a second.
I think it's that. I can't remember. If you can look it up for me, that'd be great. Because then
Yeah.
what it's going to do is that's going to populate the name of this Tinderbox file. So while we're at it, let's just go ahead and hit save this to the desktop. X Meetup 07JUN.
I just put in the chat. It's name, all lowercase.
Yeah, like that, plus document, right?
You know, it's the key. You want the key. It's a key name, so you want square brackets.
All right. Okay, so now if we apply this to the note, we'll go ahead and delete these. Okay, and we can see that we've got, and let's just pull this out here. You can see it. So we've got note 1. So the name of the note, the ID, the date, and the ID number of note 1, plus the name of the Tinderbox file to which this note came from. And since we're doing that, we can always go here and add a underscore there, delete these again, go like this. So now effectively by doing that, I can always go back. This is the particular note, a made up ID number that I can later parse for myself if I want to, and the name of the Tinderbox file to which this task came from. So by doing this kind of hard string, I can now copy and paste this to do across any of my Tinderbox files. And I'm going to always be able to get back to the file to which, and the particular note to which that I was inspired to create this task. Plus for internal operations right now, I've got the note ID that I can interact with. So I find that really cool. So the next thing we now want to think about is how do we parse this owner out? So I actually want to be able to parse the owner details into owner. So we can do that. So now that we've gone ahead and done that, now what we're going to do is we're going to create another variable. We're going to actually do that within the loop. We're going to say variable owner equals, variable string the owner equals. And what do we want this variable string to be? Well, remember, and let's remember the context. Remember earlier we were talking about context. So in the context of this particular variable, we are in a .each loop. And so what that means is this variable is going to get created for each operation against each item in that particular list. And so, and in this context, we've got two items. One has an at an at owner designation, and another one I didn't bother saying who I wanted it to be assigned to at this point. So how do we go about extracting that at Becker element? And I think one of the things to think about too, and the lesson learned here is, in your own mind, think about the context of English. Like, what do I want Tinderbox to do? I want Tinderbox to extract. I want Tinderbox to find. I want Tinderbox to take out. And so that kind of look for the word that comes to your mind, and then go to ATB ref and search for that operation. And what I found, Mr. Bernstein has been really great in kind of using a natural language for the operator, for naming these operators. So, okay, so in this context, the word that came to mind for me is I want to be able to extract out of the note name the owner's item. So if I go to extract, and you'll see, here we go. We've got an operator called extract. And then you can come in and learn about extract. And extract uses a thing called, uses regular expression, which is a pattern matching methodology that was invented in the 50s at kind of like the dawn of computing. So let's go ahead and decide on what and how we want to extract. And I'll just go ahead and, so I don't have to type it out on the fly. I'll come back here. And the extract functionality I came up with was this. And what are we extracting from? We're extracting from vtask. Yeah. So what this one line is going to do is it's going to say, make the variable owner equal to, and task is the individual item that we're now evaluating within that .each loop. And what I want you to do is I want you to extract anything that has the @ sign and has a combination of capital letters, lowercase letters, or numbers. And that is in fact a full word, and or even has possibly underscores in it, and populate that into vowner. So what that's doing is it's going to be looking for basically anything that's an @ and a full string word, that's something that's bounded by a word, and that's what this the b bound regular expression means. And we can and you can look up any number of different regular expression tools to help you do that. One of my favorite, by the way, for doing that is BB Edit. We go to BB Edit. We'll drop in a Lorem here. And here, let me do this. New BB Edit file. And this is a great example of Tinderbox being a fantastic tool, but also, working in combination with other tools.
We're not seeing your BB edit.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Oh, okay.
So, if before I start going nuts with Tinderbox, I am like, okay, this is an example of the type of text that I have. And if you've got BB Edit, you can pull up its pattern playground. And here is the pattern playground in BB Edit. And so what you're going to, and so BB Edit has like a little cheat sheet here that you can use to help you figure out what your different codes are for writing your regular expression. You can look this up into other groups as well. But essentially what I'm telling, and what we can do here is we can copy that string here, and that's going to help us see, okay, this regular expression is matching exactly on the term that I want at Becker, and just getting me only the owner's name within the string. So now that I know that that works, I can then so now I've got the variable that's pattern matching to the regex on vowner. So now I can just go back here and I can say the owner of vnotes equals vowner. Okay, so now if we delete these, apply that. Okay, and so now I've got the owner at Becker within the owner. Now in this context, in my example, I don't really want the @ sign there. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to say dot replace @. Okay, and so now if we go do it again, Just get the name without the @ sign and the owner. So now I've got my task set up there. So this we're kind of working slowly but surely through this process. Now, what's interesting, and this is what I was playing with this week, is once I've set up the owner, I don't actually want the owner continually being in the note name, because that's now redundant and that's going to look funny in the reports, and I don't like that. So I was playing around with various ways about going through that process. And so now this is what I ended up deciding on. And there are various ways to do this, but I said v note equals v note v task dot replace the owner. So, and remember earlier in the conversation, we said the order to which you run a Tinderbox operation matters. And so rather than having the task be the note that gets created, I'm going to have the v note that gets created. So the note that I'm now going to get created for me is actually going to be the name of the task item with the owner removed from the name. So now I'm going to be able to get that, and then the other thing I want to be able to do is
you need to fix the spelling of task. VTSK, not TAK.
Yeah, sorry. Perfect. Okay. And then the other thing that I want to be able to do too, and this is not always necessary, but I find it sometimes to be useful to be more explicit. We'll say variable string v task equals v path plus, and then you guys see, have all seen this before. I like using prefixes in my names. V note. And so now we go like that. So essentially what we're now saying is, hey, Tinderbox, I want you, for each of the items that are in this list, I want you to find the owner if there is one. If there is one, pull it out of the note name, create a new note, create that task for the path, and now do that. So if we do this, and I screwed something up. Oh, this happens quite a bit. All right, this is, what did I do?
I think you want the task without the A in create.
No, I don't. I want.
Oh no, I see you. No, I take that back.
U path. Oh, I get it right here. I don't need this anymore because the path's in there.
Okay.
Okay. All right, there we go. And now here's another interesting thing too. Tinderbox by default looks at signs and a note name and will automatically create a place. I don't do that because I use @ signs for mentions. So whenever I create a new Tinderbox file, I go up and I turn off the prototype and the @ symbol in the names. So now if we get rid of that and do it again. Okay, and that didn't work. So now we need to see what's wrong with my remove. Not replace v owner. Because v owner hasn't been, this is the order of items again. So I need to extract the owner and then I can remove the owner. Okay, so now, and then that one got screwed up because its replace was 0. That should have been fine though. Okay, we'll continue to debug that in a minute. But that allows me to then, capture that, and I got to see why that's not doing. Now, here's the other thing that I did. You see how that S is lowercase? And we'll get back to, I'll copy this in here. And then if I go down here, I can say, v note equals, and now what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing the first character of the string, which is in this context is going to be S, and I'm then making it uppercase, and then I'm going to replace the rest of the string with that. And so if I go up here instead of spelled wrong. All right, so now if I delete these again, and we'll go back to figure out why that other note's not working. So I've got set up so now I've got the S's capitalized, which I kind of find fun. And then the last thing I want to do, and I got to figure out why this replace is killing that note name, because it shouldn't. V note. Oh, because I don't need to declare this. I don't need to declare it again. That's probably why. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do here is I want to, when I'm done making that interaction, I want to go to link from ID v notes task. Hang on. There. Got it. So what this last one's going to do too is once I actually create the task, it's then going to link this task to this note. So we go ahead and delete these now, do it again. Okay, and so now you'll see this task is linked to note 1. This note is linked to that task, and I'll figure out in just a second why that name's not working. And now we've got our function set up. If you know, I think it's down here. Owner.
Suggestion: try clearing owner at the top of your loop, and then define it below that.
Yeah, it could. But it's working on my other end. I'm trying to see what I did with my replace that. Nothing. So let's just go here because I think that's what's killing it. But let's see. Right. So
being killed to the point where you do the create. So you need to figure out what's causing that to be a incorrect pass to the create. So v task is being created in a way you don't want.
Yeah. V task equals v path plus this plus task plus v note. And v note's being defined up here. So it's getting killed up here.
Mm-hmm. And that's getting killed because the replace is not working correctly.
Yeah, and v task replace v owner nothing. Oh, I know why.
Because v owner matches.
Yeah.
Nothing in it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll debug that later. Let's just keep with the last few minutes we have. All right. Let's put that back. All right. Well, I'll debug that in a minute. Okay. So what we've now got is we have our task created, and then finally the last thing I want to be able to do is go up here. Whoops. Come on. And I'll debug that other thing in just a minute, but let's do this really quick. We'll go up to HTML and we'll say table. Hang on. And we'll just keep this really simple. It will be table head, a table row, table head, value, $name, grab a couple. I'll just do 2 to keep it simple. And owner. We'll close out that row. And then for each of the children, we're going to process the children into the next table. And so then we're going to say table row, equals table data. And I screwed this up. I actually want this. And this is going to say name. And that's going to say owner. And then I can go like that. It's going to be table data.
Close table data.
Yep. Let's do that to make it a little easier to read. All right, so now, if I go then now apply this template to this note, do that. You can see I've now got my, and then again, that's in variable fix, but now I've got my task list, which I now can go like this. And I'll go over here and do this file, new spreadsheet. And so then if I'm sharing a Google Doc with my team, I can just copy this and paste it in. And now I've got a task list that I could be collaborating and sharing back with people. And you could add any number of different, and we'll fix a couple of these typos just real quick, but you can add any number of different columns to this, items to this, use the conditional formatting in Google Docs to like show when tasks are complete. So that, you know, that another thing you'd want to do here is like status. Right, so if I now create that and I go here and I'll say this way, say this one's status is complete. And then I've got templates. My table template in the 5C school automates all of this. But you can just simply go here and say status. Go down here. Add status. All right. Look at the table. And so now we've got status. So now there's a couple things we can finish up, fix up. I think I've left a caret up here somewhere. Yep, there's that caret there. So that cleans that up. And the last thing we're kind of missing is why is this name getting nuked? And I got to figure out why that is. So let's go to the stamp because it's not getting nuked in my other file. And then let's just show you one other thing I do, and then I'll fix this. So then once I've got my stamp generally running the way I like, I'll say F parse task note. And I'll then copy my function over just to make it quick. So then here's my function. And the difference between a stamp and a function is I want to be passing context to the function. So this is and so the it's all the same action code. The only difference is the ID number is being passed to the note. And then as we know, because my files get large, I use on visits. Oops. P task. And so on the on visit for the P task, I want to trigger this function because I want to automate this stuff so I don't have to be doing the stamps. I'll send ID. And then I'm going to say on visit P task goes to the task prototype. We say on visit equals stamp. That. So what that's going to do is when I visit this note, it's going to stamp that prototype or stamp that, stamp the on visit stamp. The on visit stamp is going to trigger that function. And so now that I've got that, and I did it wrong, actually. I don't want the P note. This is not on visit stamp. This is on visit P note. And I don't want it here. I want it on the P note because it's the Pre-note, there we go. So what this means is every time I visit this stamp, it's going to, and I see what, okay. That's what I did wrong. Got it. Let me put this back. Set up. And you'll see one other thing I'm going to do right here. So I said at Becker, set up digital twin, and then set up digital twin premium library. And I'll show you the difference between my functioning code and our stamp we just created in just a second. Okay, so now I'm in the context. I'm writing my notes, and now that because I've got this this whole function with the on stamp program, now I can click away, come back and visit the notes, and that should have triggered the parse task ID. Parse task ID. Darn it.
I think you maybe got the names mixed up.
Do I?
Go look at your on visit.
No, I think we've got.
Stamp.
I know what happened. I just copied and pasted my. It's just what we experienced with Dave Rogers previously. I copy and pasted my code, and so it created it all down in here. So let's go back here, and we actually have it going to the resources folder. Right. So we just experienced the exact same problem we had with Dave earlier. Is Tinderbox is doing what we asked it to do. It's just not doing it in the context we expected. All right. And just so we don't boggle the mind with everybody when we're testing a function, we can grab all of this. Go back to our stamp. Let's create a new stamp 2. 2. And because we're not doing it without a function, we got to delete all these ID designators. And then we can debug the actual code that was working for me in my live file with ID. Okay, so we go like that. Apply. All right, and I've broken something. All right, well, we can keep debugging this really quick. Or, let's just make sure the original snamp's working. Huh. What did I just break? All right, when I started doing the conversion to the function, I broke something, but we'll figure that out. Okay, but you get the idea. We're kind of over time, and I'll fix this before I post the live file. But so what this allows me to do then is I can stay in the context. Oh, the reason why it's not working is my tasks have been deleted. At Becker task 1, and let's like do task 2. Okay, so now if we go like that, there we go. Got it. So now it's working. And I got to figure out why this, I'll debug it and figure out why that's tweaking. It's working in my other file. But now I have the ability to, I think I know what's happening. Because in my other demo file, what I was messing around with was the idea of removing the tasks from, here. This is why. Now it's going to work. Because I was playing around with cleaning it up. So let's do that again. At Becker task. That's 1. New task 2. Let's delete these out. Come back and fix it again. There we go. And so we got do task 1. And in the function I pasted over. Oh, because my other file was using an on-add prototype. The notes equals. All right, now that will work. Okay. Because this is getting nuked again. And I'll have to figure out why it's getting nuked in a second. All right, so there we get our 2 notes, and we've got our tasks, and you see that they're linked. Right, so that's again, there's a whole bunch of nuances you can build into this file for yourself. But this way, as I'm doing my project, when I think of a thing that when something comes to mind that I feel like I need to do, I can create that task for myself in the context to where the idea came up, and then stay working on my project, and then later come back to doing those things. So any as we kind of wrap up, any thoughts, comments, questions, reactions? And before I tweak that, before I post the final file, I'll go ahead and make some final tweaks. What do you think?
Cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Good
All right.
review of
What?
it was a good review for me of variables.
Yeah, and it's kind of a follow-up. And again, the point is to just kind of incrementally step through this and test each of the different things you're asking Tinderbox to do, and then you can zero in on what's going on. That's really the way to do it. All right, everybody. Well, have a glorious weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, you too. Bye.